Hey folks, Steve here with another End of Empire video. In this video, we are going to be doing at least some part of the American Revolutionary War scenario again. I can't guarantee where we're going to stop for this part one, but I'm going to set up the format of this video to be done in parts and not guaranteed to cover any definite amount of time, like years worth of the campaign, just because I'm going to go through the second playthrough much more quickly for you anyway. It's going to take about the same amount of time for me, except I won't be recording as much. But I will snap in at times to talk about important strategic situations or major events that have occurred during the course of the campaign so that you can still see how things have progressed. The goal of the second playthrough is to play more competently as the British now that I have a much greater understanding of how everything comes together in this game, and really maybe play both sides better, not just the British, play better as the Americans as well. Um, and part of it is, and maybe I just have the energy for it, it's getting to be about fall weather where I live, or fall is creeping in. And for some reason, late summer and fall just makes me think of colonial times. I don't know why that is. Maybe just because of where I grew up, and I don't know. There's something connected there, guys. I can't explain it, but I do like this time of year. It also makes me think of the American Revolution and colonial times, and I feel energized to play it again, to play the scenario over again, taking my lessons learned and to play it on through. So that is not to say that the first playthrough is invalidated in any way or is wrong. I just want to play it again. It was that much more fun. And it does make me think about the fact that when it comes to this game in particular, uh, it what I assume must happen is people buy the game or they get the game and they look at all this crazy American Revolution stuff and they say, "Oof, I don't know if I want to do that. Let me play something else. Ooh, this French and Indian War scenario looks like a lot of fun. Let's play that first instead." And then they play that and they have a pretty good time with it, but they don't feel the spark of, the ultimate spark of joy, maybe. And they never get around to going through the effort and the trouble to get the American Revolution set up, which I think is a bummer because I think this scenario is far and away much more engaging than any other. The other scenarios are fine. This one in particular just is really quite interesting just because you have a lot more units, a lot more leaders. The system feels more complete in terms of what you're trying to do with it across the whole board. Everything every turn kind of matters in what you're trying to achieve, and you can expect there to be multiple combats every turn. It's just so much more. It is the main course as it should be, and I fear people who have this game maybe don't take that step to play this scenario. They play some of the smaller ones, and they're really missing out on the true. This is your stake, right? Everything else in the box is fine and dandy, but this is your main course stake. You don't want to pass up in my mind. So I'm playing it again, baby. We're doing it. So I'll cut here, and we'll come back at some point in the campaign, and we'll talk about what all has happened uh, since the beginning. But we start, as always, with uh, as always, the two times I've done this. Um, we start with the siege at Boston with Gage with the main British army in Boston with a fortification marker, basically just hanging out until they get forced to leave, or the British ships, show up in the spring of 1776 to leave. Meanwhile, Ward and Thomas have stacks outside, keeping them hemmed in. We do have various militia that are potentially at our disposal, including the Massachusetts militia, which I'm sure we will want to use to make some somewhat futile attacks on Boston. We have our Boston powder shortage. We have no reforms, so the American military is not well trained at all at this point. We're still suffering a number of penalties, and we don't have any artillery anyway. So that's the start of the scenario. Just like we did before, I will play through, and we'll see what happens when we come back. The board will be very different and will be much more populated, as in the first playthrough, obviously. Everything else is pretty empty. We've got a couple of units called out, these guys, to intercept Dunmore when he shows up in Norfolk, and then all the other militia. I am making a concerted effort this playthrough to be a little more organized with the counters on the board, So basically um, keeping militia nearby the state off the coast all the time, just so I don't forget about them and where they're at. And as units are removed or blocked from entering, that they're put in a little bit of a more logical place. It's really just for me for organization purposes, but I figured I'd just call that out. I'm trying to be more organized because there is a lot of counters here, guys, a lot to kind of work through. Um, all right, we'll see you in a second here, wherever we may end up in the narrative of the campaign. Okay, here we are. I'm going to do a check-in here in the spring of 1776. The Americans have had a pretty good time, though not around Boston and not necessarily in the South. So let's take a quick scope around. In the South, we have Prevost, who successfully subjugated Georgia and has some garrison in Savannah, wanting to keep these guys kind of away from the fighting, at least for now. And then we've got a provincial regular that ran out to Augusta and, will open the door for some more reinforcements. Prevost has been delayed a couple of times by militia. And basically, we now have Montgomery, who came all the way down here and is holding the space to try to delay the British advance. And then we just got some reinforcements that I think are going to make things even more difficult, because what we'll want to do is get these guys like out here so that the British can't kind of come back around very easily. At least that's an idea. But we'll see. In North Carolina, I had moved these Virginia units over to here, had dropped them off by Montgomery, and they basically blocked some entry by the British. The British unit eventually died in the fighting, and then these guys sort of replaced themselves up to full strength. We now have a garrison in Wilmington due to new turn entry units. We'll probably move some stuff down to Berne. And as you can see, the regular reinforcements are starting to come in. We've got Philadelphia reasonably well garrisoned. We had put a few units in here. Right now, New York is pretty empty. We'll probably rectify that here soon. We do have a fortified stack hanging out in what is this? New Haven, to sort of be a New England rapid response force. And then Washington has tried to do some chip damage to what is now Howe's stack in Boston. But we only have gotten like very middling success, and I think we've maybe hit one British regular for a step loss, but not eliminated one. So not a whole lot to speak of here in terms of major progress. Probably am going to simply have Howe withdraw from Boston, go to Halifax. We'll get our boatload of reinforcements, and we'll sort of reorganize the British Army and German mercenaries for dedicated sort of operating armies to redeploy to the continent after regroup. So that's kind of the plan there. We're going to have the British fleet in for this turn. Probably the greatest success for the Americans have been their Canadian campaign, where they managed to do, we do have some step losses, 5 British step losses already from defeating the British around Montreal, and we have actually killed what's his name, Carleton. We killed Carleton. He died in the combats. And now Ward is holding a strong position here. And we were thinking about Quebec, but I, as the British, have now gotten several reinforcements, which is going to make it a tougher nut to crack, at least for the time being. Hold up in Quebec, but we still have a potent force here. We stopped a British reinforcement for holding Montreal, so we'll need to garrison something here for the long haul. This is important because it impacts the native ally coming in on the British, because now we control Montreal. And we got all these really nice, these 2 nice, potent Canadian units that are in. We just need to get Ward off his butt. And we have not gotten the Knox and the Gridley artillery trains together to get our better artillery unit, but we'll try to figure out a way to take care of that, ideally this turn. So that's it right now. So that's basically the result of 1775 in the South. Things are just starting to cook in around Boston. The British are going to make their exit. Then in Canada, the Americans are doing quite well, and they're going to seek to either go for Quebec or just kind of hold steady. It's just going to come down to what happens this turn. I think the Americans may try to take Quebec. Um, it's certainly worth a shot. I mean, I don't see why they shouldn't try it, but we'll have to see. So there you go, guys. Quick check in, and I'll be playing through 1776 now. Okay, hey guys, we're here now at the beginning of 1777. Basically, the well, I guess we're still in the winter turn, the beginning of 1777. So we haven't played the first winter turn yet. So this is the end result, basically, of 1776, and British are feeling pretty good with where they're at right now, all except for maybe Canada, but even that's not that big a deal from the British perspective. So let's talk about where things have gotten. Prevost down here in Savannah, he's not activating very frequently at all. And whoops, I must have pushed that stack. I didn't mean to do that. Those guys are in Charleston. So we just haven't been able to do anything coming out of Georgia. But that's all well and good. I mean, we kind of tied things down there. South Carolina remains safe for the moment, but it's really North Carolina that's had a problem. And you can kind of see, just zoomed out a little bit, we have North Carolina, Burgoyne. We've got a big old stack with Clinton, tall stack, you can see, in Alexandria. We also have Cornwallis in New York, as well as some bits of Connecticut. And we actually still have Howe in Boston. He's not left. He's kind of punched around a little bit, and we took Portsmouth. And now the rest of Connecticut and Rhode Island are looking mighty juicy to take. And the British are kind of backed up into Quebec still at the moment, but I'm not sure how much longer that'll last. They may be able to break out soon. The significant thing that I've done is I basically figured out, like, I could keep Howe in Boston just because the Americans failed enough attacks that just them trying to put together enough combat factors was going to be a challenge. And then with all the reinforcements that came in on turns like 8, 7, 8, 9, I basically organized stacks up in Halifax, figured out the good mix of regulars and mercenaries and whatever other units that could bleed off step losses for the British regulars, and they made successive landings over the span of a couple of turns. So we had New York, obviously, as one. They got that under control pretty easy because they kind of got in there when the Americans barely had anything in there at all. So kind of an easy pickup. We obviously still had control of Boston, and then we had a landing in Alexandria. I was debating Alexandria versus Baltimore, or maybe closer to Philadelphia, but Alexandria seemed easier, and it provides a capability to kind of cut the colonies in half here. Assuming they leave and they go, remove a few of these units. But we're just kind of creating a situation where we're going to bisect the colonies, and that will just be helpful. There's enough strength between a couple of these stacks that they could maybe contest, but I got to get them kind of grouped together. And right now, it's just tough to do that. The cadence of the turns is just making it difficult to get stuff put together. And then, we had landed in Wilmington, enforced Greenback, and now, since then, Burgoyne has kind of been careful to venture too far inland, but has made sure to take New Bern and garrison it, and is also spread out here a little bit within reaction range to tie down, one, to make sure that supply is good and safe, and that they have some blocking of some entry hexes. So this is just a little blister of British control here, but we'll probably see Burgoyne try to push Green back. The thing they got to be careful of is like it wouldn't be hard for Green to try to do some maneuvering and try to catch these guys out of supply or something. Um, and this is what I was talking about in the strategy video. Where like, do you really want to go out in that middle open space, with all that clear terrain? Like, do you really want to do that and have the Americans run circles around you? So it kind of feels like I don't want to push. We're going much further inland until Charleston gets taken care of, and we need Prevost to kind of get his butt in gear. Now, the nice thing is, from the British perspective, that if we can hold this through the rest of this year, and we still got a lot of changeover for the Continental Army to come, and some more reinforcements, though not as many as we've had in the past. We're going to have, let's see, 2 points for Savannah, 2 points for Wilmington, 2 points for Bern. So we're at 246. 8, 10. Then I got to look here. 10, 12, 14. We'll probably pick this guy up as well. So 16, 18, 18 points of the ports divided by 5 is a +3. And we still don't have French entry, so we could see American collapse here pretty quickly this year. It seems like 1777 is kind of like the big year in the game, just in terms of what you can potentially achieve. Right now, the British step losses, we are at 7, but that's a far cry from the needed 20 for French entry. And this is why it's so important that Burgoyne not get over eager and try to venture too far inland, or even for Prevost. Like right now, I think the British could just kind of hold steady, let the Americans try to do what they can do. But we can continue to do well here, and maybe even, pick up Providence and Newport, and even New London, and that would basically give us a +4 to the collapse die roll, which would almost make it, damn close to being incredibly, say this the right way, it would be highly likely that the economic collapse would happen at the end of 1777. So generally, the British are feeling pretty good. I think the strategy of, basically creating good, strong stacks that are all, not necessarily all like exactly equal in strength, but all potent forces with enough cushion steps included, whether that's mercenaries, provincials, or otherwise. And then, coming into a port where, the other important thing was, as these guys came in, because they had taken ports, they could receive reinforcements that had come in on turns like 9 and 10 and stuff. So if they could make the landing, they could be further reinforced, and this just gives them bases to operate out of. So we functionally have, 2 southern home bases, 3 if you count Bern, not counting St. Augustine. Yeah, if you don't count that and just say like that's kind of out of the way. And then even in the mid-Atlantic, I guess you could consider Alexandria in the south, but our 2 main points of control in the middle states right now are Alexandria and New York, and then we have Boston and Portsmouth. So we have a couple ports in each major region with which we can conduct forays as we desire. And we just need to try to get out of Quebec right now. We have reinforcements in there. You can see the stack that is opposing them is basically the American stack here. And the way it's kind of set up is, at least at the moment, is that on the attack, the Americans can't do much, but on defense, they do reasonably well. And so it's almost like a stalemate. But the problem is that's a lot of American units that are way up here out of the way, and pretty far from home. They're in supply due to the supply hex and everything, but they're pretty far away. And in all these other places, like there's not even that many units around that can contest. Now, I think the Americans are hoping for all this stuff to come onto the board and be the game changer to give the Americans enough of a bite that they can try to whittle some stuff away, reclaim some territory. They are in danger of, the British kind of creating a case like, we're going to leave Boston, we're going to work our way through here. We're going to have to deal with uh, militia, sure, but if we can clear the militia, we take this port, we take these supply hexes, um, come down here, grab these, we could start to shut New England down. And I think if we're managing to achieve that, that definitely puts some tricky bits uh, for the Americans. So right now, it's concentration of power. It's going to be, can the Americans hold on to what they have? They need to try to find some spaces like green, maybe swings down and attacks burn, just to kind of relieve that, try to relieve that port and have it be raided instead of occupied. Um, try to draw out the British so they can come in behind them, but I just, playing conservatively as the British, not feeling like we have to do that, is probably going to be a really clear thing. And I think for the British, it's like picking what you feel safe to leave behind in a hex and then venturing forth with some force that's potent enough to be threatening. Um, but again, even if they don't, if they just hold on to what they have and let the Americans, bruise their knuckles trying to attack them, this is probably enough to cause some pretty significant economic collapse. And then once all those units disappear, that's when the British can more freely expand into the space and start shutting stuff down. Um, and then it all collapses from there. So it feels like this is like the super critical, important year. The Americans right now don't feel like they've got enough forces at their disposal to make a big difference. And that feels bad for them. So it's like now I'm on the reverse side of where I was at in the first scenario, where it was like, oh gosh, the Americans are doing so well. Now it feels like the British are doing very well, and I need to think through, what is the best thing the Americans can do to try to attrit the British somewhere, anywhere that they can, that will be enough for victory. So we'll show things for 1778 in the next clip of this video. Maybe the game will have been decided by then. I don't know. Hey guys, here we are at the end of 1777. The Americans just barely avoided economic collapse. It's a +4 to the die roll, and I rolled a 2, so they did not have economic collapse, but boy, was it close. So here's where things stand. Uh, Georgia continues to be under the boot of the crown. In Charleston, desperate attacks on the part of the British to try to dislodge the Americans because Burgoyne was under threat ended up killing their leader and failing to capture Charleston. In North Carolina, a mad scramble of every American general that could be found surged across North Carolina to try to surround and capture Burgoyne. This attempt failed, and what ended up happening was Burgoyne retreated to the coast, and then he counterattacked into Wilmington, towards Wilmington, and what ended up occurring, because we had swung down and recaptured Bern and Wilmington, he counterattacked into Wilmington. However, the Americans were able to, they retreated to here, they collected their forces and had counterattacked again against the British in Wilmington, and Burgoyne ran out of cushion units, and he started losing British steps, and we got to the point where he could not afford to lose any more. We got up to 17 off-map British steps, so 3 away from French entry. Fortunately, we had the fleet here on the south map for winter, and he was able to retreat and got put in a Norfolk here, but it was a damn near thing. And in other places, these guys were surrounded, so they were trying to force a general, what do you call it? A surrender. due to retreats, but now that the fleet's here, that's not so much a problem. But the Americans have been trying to batter their way into Alexandria to no avail. New York is almost unassailable. George Washington is outside. He's kind of monitoring, doing what he can. Meanwhile, Montgomery is trying to clean up Connecticut, and he's done a decent job of it. And Benedict Arnold, I guess I need to restore these guys. I need to do that. Has somewhat liberated Rhode Island, though the British still hold Newport. And Howe has put a detachment in this port here. And we had previously, I can't remember if we did this in the last turn or the last segment, but we did liberate Portsmouth thanks to Benedict Arnold. So there's sort of a flurry of activity, and we've seen the attrition of a lot of units. On the British side, I think the fact that they managed to avoid economic collapse is probably what's going to decide the game. If they had economically collapsed, I could see the game starting to fall apart for them. But they're managing to just hold on. And it's kind of interesting. The British get into these ports, they get fortified, and then it's just up to the Americans to bash their face into the brick wall to try to just to trip them away enough that they can make some headway. And what's interesting is you want to force as many combats as you want. You're going to lose the combats, but you don't care. You're going to force the combat. Why? Because eventually the leader die roll is going to come up and kill somebody. So we have a number of guys captured, but we've also had a number of guys killed. Perry might have just been withdrawn, but we had a number of leaders that have been killed now, and that was the sort of the other danger for Burgoyne. He was the last leader in a stack. He could not keep up any much longer, even if the Americans were starting to just lose every combat. They were starting to get enough combat results that they were digging into the stacks. So it's kind of it's a little perilous now. It's tight. It's definitely tight, and I think the British are just feel like they're on the verge of winning if they can force the Americans to collapse. But now the Americans are looking to figure out where can they get 3 more step losses against British regulars, off map, to get French entry in. That's going to be the key thing. So going into 1778 with tension high of what's going to occur. And I should point out in Canada, nobody can activate. Nobody activates ever in Canada. This is a total stalemate all year long. They might as well be playing, might as well be having snowball fights like World War I because nothing's happening up there. But everywhere else, it is tense. Tense rolling just to see what's happening. The South remains a tricky space. The British may try to break out here. They may try to land and burn because there are cushions in this hex that were there previously that Burgoyne's going to have to take a hold of. So this is still a very potent, strong stack. I guess I could start cleaning up the port rated markers, but yeah, very intense. We'll see what happens in 1778. The French have not entered the war yet. Okay, here we are at the end of 1778. Now this is the campaign that I think I'm hitting the right notes that I wanted to with playing the British better, and then just meaning I have to amp up my play as the American player, where there's been a lot of activity here. I'm not even sure how well I can summarize it. The British have been properly kicked out of the South. We had talked about the liberation of Wilmington, but that was not the only thing that ended up going on. The order of operations is hard to describe here, but I'll talk about the end result. Even though there were armies moving up and down the coast, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, even in the winter in the South where it's a little bit easier to operate. We eventually pushed the stack that was in Savannah out with some concerted effort, and Savannah was reclaimed. And I forgot to do attrition for these guys. So that guy's gone, and then this guy is reduced, and he'll probably be eliminated on the next turn. That's my bad. Anyway, so they ended up getting kicked out. They tried to retreat to St. Augustine. They had a kick through the American Georgian militia, but they did get through and got back to St. Augustine eventually. Now you see Clinton's there, so there was kind of a merging of stacks here. I haven't totally reorganized it very well, but the Americans had done a little push them out. With a lot of leaders moving around doing crazy stuff. They're currently in a holding pattern here on the coast. But why Clinton is over there is over the course of the year, the Americans were battering their way into Alexandria, and it was just kind of getting to the point where like you just try no matter what as the Americans. There's almost no reason not to try to attack until you're almost totally denuded of capability because just rolling, you get that odd, you know, step loss, and when you take a step loss, usually your combat factor doesn't go down very much because the reverse side of American units are still at 2. So if you just look at this guy for an example, like okay, he's got a 4, a boxed 4. He's 2 on attack, 4 on defense. Well, if he takes a step loss, he's still 2 on attack. So the Americans can actually take step losses and not lose effectiveness. So they can go, even if it's 1 to 2 odds, 1 to 2 minus 1, like they can actually take a 1-1 result. Um, and as long as they can keep activating and keep going, they might as well try to do that. And we got to the point where uh, Clinton was just out of sorts here, and he evacuated to Norfolk so that we could have a nice big gigantic British stack to maybe break out. And that's where Burgoyne had gone after Wilmington. So we had this big stack. What the Americans ended up doing is grabbing Washington and as many units as he could corral up, and it was almost a Yorktown type of situation. And in fact, the most amazing thing out of this was the fact that, and I'm not sure where I put the counter now. We had the French fleet show up, and the French fleet won 2 different naval battles against the British. And we had this situation where it was like, oh my gosh, are we going to get an early Yorktown? Is this going to be the game? Only it's happening in Norfolk, Virginia. But it ended up being that the French fleet was not here for winter supply tracing, which was really going to be the important thing. And we just could never get a retreat die roll, though we did try to batter down the door of Norfolk with the American army. And what ended up eventually happening is the French fleet became unavailable. The British fleet had come on, and then they did we put it down here, and they did a naval move out to St. Augustine to regroup. Because if they had stayed here, it's like what pick your poison. You're either going to get, diminished until you're losing all your British steps, or something else is going to occur. But it does mean the liberation of Virginia, which is really important for the Patriot cause. In the North, the British have been having a pretty good time. Um, Benedict Arnold died trying to take Gloucester back. Just due to a dumb die roll, he died, and we ended up having to put Lincoln in command of this force. And they've been trying to do what they can to liberate things. So they liberated here because what's his name? Phillips failed to react. So they got this port back, but the British still control Boston. They control Newport. Cornwallis, with a big stack of British regulars, are in Providence. They've got guys sitting here in New London. And then, we would like to find a way to kind of shut Connecticut down, but it was more important to try to deal economic damage. And so we're still, New York is garrisoned by a whole bunch of these provincial establishment units. So it's not easily assailable. And so the Americans kind of pulled back. The Americans still have a lot of strength in Philadelphia. In Canada, there was an attempt by the Abenaki Native Americans to try to cut a supply line over here, and the Americans managed to defend. The British did exit Quebec and try to take on Gates, but they ended up having to beat a retreat back to Quebec, and they've got a lot of these mercenary steps that are probably going to get navally transported out of Quebec to help some of these diminished British stacks down the way. Now, I would definitely say in this current game position, like the Americans are looking like they're going to win because they just passed their second economic collapse roll, and I kind of feel like this is the balance factor. If the British, well, if the Americans can get the French to come in, that forces the withdrawal and staves off economic collapse. But I feel like the game gets more intense if, say, the West Indies withdrawal happens, a bunch of British units have left, and they've done that. I've done the withdrawals. We're currently sitting at 26 British steps removed from the map right now, so it's tight, it's close for the British. Um, it feels like the game would be more evened out if, say, we had the French entry, the British withdrew, but then the Americans had near economic collapse happen, and then that would make it just so much more difficult for the Americans to operate. But now the British are heavily reduced due to all those withdrawals, and it would feel like both sides are kind of taking their lumps with the French providing at least a little bit of relief. Here, I think because the Americans are going to have a whole extra year with their full army, they're kind of advantaged right now. But this campaign definitely feels tighter than the last one, and is more exciting just because of how many things I've had to do or opportunities the Americans have tried to seize to end the game, and we're still going here. So now we're actually going to go to 1779, which we did not reach in the previous playthrough, which is exciting. We still are going to be waiting a while for the Spanish to come in, but they may come in this coming year at the end of the year, and the war continues on. So, and Benedict Arnold is dead. He died a patriot hero, guys. He's not a traitor. He never betrayed us. Anyway, we'll do a cut here, and I'll show the aftermath of 1779. Okay, hey guys, here we are at the beginning of 1780, and the game remains tight all through the year of 1779. I was thinking that the British were going to have to call it, that we should end the game. The game is over. We're not going to be able to win, but I continue to play through it. I'm glad I did. But let's take a review of where things are at. Down here in Georgia, Clinton remains quiet, waiting for an opportunity. He's going to get one, I think, this coming year, and we'll explain why here momentarily. Generally, the Americans still control the South. And in a series of offensives, Washington, assisted by Lafayette, ground the provincials in New York into dust, though it took them several tries and an entire campaign season to do it. New York has been liberated, and Lafayette sits there. Washington pushed onward and has been contesting Connecticut against Cornwallis. And generally, I'd say, in terms of the attrition, it's not been good for the British, and things are kind of at a very it's tense because now the British really only control Rhode Island and Boston on the continent, which is kind of a challenge space for them. But what's interesting is they only need to control that much, and I'll explain why in a moment. Up here, there's been some back and forth near Quebec. Basically, the British are remaining on the general defensive now because they don't want to lose any more steps. The situation now, as we look across the map, that the Native Americans in this scenario have not been very influential, largely because I think of the capture of Montreal that just had kept the British from being able to get in there. But you'll notice I don't have guys in there anymore. Well, why is that? Well, okay, maybe I should pause for a second. Over here, the Spanish have entered the war, and they were able to put their reinforcements in Louisiana. Galvez activated, and he went up and took Natchez, which is important. And that's all really he got to do, which set us up pretty good for the near economic collapse die roll check, because we effectively had, like, I'm trying to think now what it was. It was like one raid, another raid, so two raids. We had raided that, so that was like three, and then 5, 7, 9. I think it ended up being like for the die roll. It was going to be a +2 for the rating and British control of ports, then -2 for French, and then -1 for the Spanish controlling Natchez. And I'm like, okay, I think we were going to be good, right? But as time goes on, and we look at turn 29, you only need a 4, and we actually rolled just enough. We rolled a 5, -1 was 4, which if it equals or exceeds the number. So the number was 4, and so we had near economic collapse occur, which pulled off a whole ton of units on the map. A whole ton. So, like, where the units are hasn't changed much, and we still control much of the territory that we did. But now, those 3 stacks of blue units were what got removed as part of near economic collapse. So this is kind of the important pivot point, and now the game is coming down to the wire, and it feels good for that reason. If we look at where British step losses are at, we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24. These two are stacked together, so 26. And actually, now we're up to 28 removed steps. If we lose a few more units, and it wouldn't take much to do it, right? We're 7 away from the British collapse. So now, in terms of what's going to happen on the board, can the British hold on to what they have? They may only need to hold on a little bit longer, because the die roll, just to show, like the die roll at the end of this next year, we need a 5 or more. If we can hold on to enough ports, if we counterattack now that much of the American strength has fallen apart, getting a 5 on that die roll at the end of this year wouldn't be too hard. So now it is tight. It is tight. Had I rolled even a little bit better on the near economic collapse, like that probably would have been enough, because then we could have just sent the Americans on a wild campaign to eliminate British units. Now it's super tight. We don't have as many units. Much of our stacks are now greatly reduced. And the British are reduced as well over time, but they potentially still have enough to hold on if they can keep control of, let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're going to have to pick up some more ports. They're going to have to attack somewhere. Norfolk is open. Maybe they can go for Wilmington. A lot of the South is now super weak. Like there's not much in Savannah again, so that gives Clinton a chance to come up and try something. I see it being not too difficult now that near economic collapse has happened for the British to counterattack now and get into ports and potentially force the final collapse. And I believe that is when the Americans lose the game. I'd have to double check the rules on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So the game's super tight still as we enter into 1780. This is going to be, I think, the final year of decision. I can't imagine the game's going to go, 1780. I don't think we could go much farther past this. I think this is going to be the year of decision. Rochambeau is going to come in later this year. Maybe that's going to be, maybe we're going to get a Yorktown situation, maybe in Boston where it all began, and that's where things are going to end up. But who knows? I'll do a cut here, and when I come back, we should have a pretty good idea of who won the game. Okay, here we are at the end of the game with an American victory on turn 34. I thought they had won on turn 33, but I think an army can retreat via ferries. I'm pretty sure if they pass the check. So the British managed to stick out one extra turn longer. Now, just kind of panning the camera around for a second, but so yeah, an American victory again. However, this one feels certainly more earned, and I feel like if near economic collapse had happened sooner in the game, the British could have very well won. And even this year, I mean, it remained feasible that they could have won on the track that they were going on, where they were at, and kind of what they were hoping to achieve. But the government of Lord North has fallen. The British government of Lord North has fallen due to 37 steps of British regulars removed. They're sort of down here in this row, um, which we achieved this turn. So in the south, the Spanish had captured Pensacola, but that's kind of as far as they could get. Wasn't much more to do there. It's kind of hard to get this fleet to do anything, the Spanish fleet. In the south, Clinton had made an amphibious invasion of Georgetown, and then from there did another naval invasion to Wilmington, and then from there was going to start marching across to Bern. Um, but he had gotten waylaid a couple of times from Greene, who threw units in front of him just to lose an automatic loss, just to force Clinton to roll activation again. He got paused here, and then on a later turn, he got in a Bern. And he was basically successful in what he was doing. Clinton was no longer trying to hold the South, but to enter and leave ports to raid them to add to the tally there, as best as could be managed. And I guess technically we could say there's this guy is in here, um, but I can't remember if I bothered to do that. But let's just say that I did for sake of argument. Um, Through here was relatively stable. Lafayette actually left New York empty to go try to hunt down the British armies in the north. There was this whole thing was going on where armies were kind of chasing each other around a little bit. Cornwallis had retreated via ferry onto this island off the coast of Rhode Island, and Rochambeau had come in and had under threat. And then what was the Canadian Army, which is gone now, is reduced to a single step, got chased around the Cape here, and um, ultimately just the concentration of the American forces that could to tie down retreat paths, the entry of the French fleet, which won a victory against the British fleet in the North Atlantic, was very key to victory here, where it just limited where these units had options to go. And obviously, winter attrition was going to be even worse for them. Maybe not for this guy, because he could technically trace, I guess, through the Gulf of Maine, overseas supply on the coast. But these guys, trapped on the island, would have had a very bad time. We would have likely seen the rest of that army taken out. There were still a lot of raided ports, so Boston and Gloucester. I don't know how that's pronounced. I'm not from Maine. I don't know. Raided. Raided. A lot of raided places. We were trying to rack those up where we could, but it just wasn't enough as the British. And then in Canada, basically the Northern Army had to retreat. Their leader died trying to attack Quebec. We got lucky on an activation on the default leader, pulled them back. They retook this hex, but basically they were pretty much out of gas. Quebec had held, but if the if the British had gotten out of Quebec sooner and had been pushing down Lake Champlain, that might have made a big difference. But eventually, the Americans were able to just concentrate enough force, and once they got New York back, it was just a matter of time to get guys focused on New England. So certainly, I think I don't know. I think holding on to Boston for as long as we did, we ended up keeping a lot of reinforcements from coming in for the Americans. But um, yeah, I don't know. We just didn't quite get to uh, what we wanted to do. Maybe we should have just pulled that stack out, and he could have been doing something else down in Virginia. I don't know. We had these tough situations where the British could hold on to ports, but eventually, they had to try to do more things. So I don't know. But there you go, guys. That's for the second playthrough, an American victory, but one much harder fought. If we were doing if we were doing a economic collapse roll, we would have 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 divided by 5 is 2, and then we have a -3, so it's a net -1 on the die roll. And I rolled a 6. A couple turns later, that might have been enough. You know, if we could get through the rest of the fall, if we get through the winter turn with not much changing, the British would have won. So just down to the wire, guys, and that's what made it more fun. That the last playthrough was fun. This one was even more fun for me because I got a much better handle of the systems and how things ought to work and how to use both factions. So I learned from the experience and I had a good time with this one. I think I'll do a separate post-mortem video and then maybe a review in the not too distant future, guys. But that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed the second playthrough, much more summarized format, but that works. Thanks for watching. Take care. Keep gaming.